Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you live around the world. Not happy, as is often the case with where we are at with our drawing of the geodesic dome, or the creation of the drawing of a geodesic dome. I had a thought to myself. We need to draw together the different versions, 1, 2 and 3, which are up for consideration, to be able to justly compare what we're seeing and how we're achieving it. The most reasoned method would be that for, how would you say, not just the elegance of how it's drawn, but the function of it, the accuracy, would be via, I would suggest, the most fundamental, less modified method or avenue. Now, the first version here was where we been drawing most of our dome structure, and it had it so that I just hide this, I actually hide them on all three of them, where we had rotated one of the planes round to the 45, and where the radius intersected at this point, we would create a grid when it went through that surface plane that I'd just hidden. This one. This was slightly modified by adapting this one to have the length of the strut, in this case here, this strut, the same length as this strut. There's nothing magical, as I keep on saying in many of the things, about doing that. It's just that by doing that, it lengthened this strut. It drew this strut up, as it were, through this plane. So that's a real fudge, but it wound up having the hexagon here that was more balanced in its dimensions. This version was again another fudge, where we would rotate the plane that had been at the 45. We could actually delete that plane there for this example, and we'd have the point, that same point here, create the line of penetration through the plane. So actually I'll get rid of this plane. It's just confusing when we're looking at it. But the line between here and here, while not creating this actual strut, creates the line of the strut. And where that line, when we use a grid line, where it penetrates the plane, where we are showing it here in the transparent teal color, where that line penetrates, it creates our strut. Each of the options is in some way better than its competitor. This one, for the reasons stated at the beginning, has prime position because it is the most basic upon which we can draw, or from which we can draw the dome. At the moment it is. This one is a bit of really is a bit of a fudge by arbitrarily deciding that we want the length of this strut down here, but has the benefit of how it generates the hexagon. And this one has a little bit more logic than version 3, has a little bit more logic than version 2, but it then has the remaining issue of the shape of the hexagon. The long leg or short leg version is, I will for the moment say, not an important feature, but this long leg version may be the preferred version for smaller domes, because it gives you that height without having to increase the base measurements. You can't directly compare the two because of that, because when you get, if you had a base measurement the same size as this would look hugely high. Now if that's what you want or need, that's just fine, but this has greater appeal for those higher dimension or bigger dimension bases, which we'll look at later on. Now, that all said, I was contemplating our next step. Before I do that, I'll come back up into plan view. Our version 1. Now these are identical. Remember, they're plan view. Then they don't show the legs, the height of the legs. That can only be seen in elevations. Yes. So anyway, the version 1 has this arc of the 4 edges here that I've referred to or commented that I see in a lot of the photos, or the impression that that's what it's showing. So therefore, assuming that that's an advantage or a feature that would be advantageous. This version I have also seen in some of the photos and drawings, and wondered why there's almost like a zigzag, be it very mild, to that line. Well, perhaps now we know. And this version 3 is back to this gentle curve. In fact, version 1 and 3 are very, very similar, and really are a variation on the theme, where we use one plane to generate this. This one's using the same method, but using 2 planes that have been angled. So really, this version and this version can just be seen as iterations of each other. So what are we comparing here? Is this an advantage or not? Is this an advantage or not? Is that an objective or subjective decision that would have to have been made? I can assume that someone that's if they're listening to this and watching this video, that already know the answer, if there is such a definitive answer, is probably just rolling their eyes and saying, "Why am I watching this?" And probably won't for much longer. But I'm assuming that this is the base upon which someone could go ahead and develop a dome, and having this background information is probably worthwhile. Now, I was going to make the comment before, I think, about what makes a 4V dome critical for our drawing. I thought that was going to be the case, but considering how we were to progress, I thought, well, no, that may be a short-sighted perspective to have, or idea to have, because we're not using the geometry of a full dome, and we are creating a deliberate setup that would force the drawing of these flush and plane sides. I thought, well, can that apply to other frequency domes? And we know that as you go up in frequency, the lumpiness or chunkiness of a dome reduces. Now that may or may not be a good thing. And I wondered, well, if we go down a frequency to a 3 dome frequency, or a 3 frequency dome, does that have any advantages? And which is going to be the very next video I'll look at. But this one was just to reiterate the 3 versions that are up for contention of the method that I want to follow. And now we've got this other idea we have to chase down. I have to then exhaust that and see whether this version, this method can apply equally to a 3V dome and what that achieves. Because the chunkiness may mean that we have a different outcome of where the hubs are located, and I don't know. In fact, as I recall, there's one of the frequencies, I think it was a 3V dome, didn't have in this full sphere, the combination of the top pentagon, or square, cube, the hexagon and this leg, because it just doesn't have this feature within the dome. But am I going to be able to force it to have a leg by using this method? It's a question I have yet to resolve or find out myself. So, as is the case, I will go away, have a look, and get back to you and see whether there's any progress or whether it was just a blind alley. Okay, that was just a little bit of a revision, maybe a little step forward, or at least a step that helps to clarify any perceived advantages of these three versions. Okay, I'll see you later. Bye.